Wednesday, June 29th, 2022 Board of Douglas County Commissioners business meeting. We want to welcome those of you who are with us here in the Old County Courthouse and folks who might be joining us online. Just a couple quick notes and reminders about how we run our meeting. First, we will have our consent agenda, and then we'll move on to general public comment. That is a time for anybody who wishes to address the County Commission about general county business not on today's agenda. All commenters will be provided 3 minutes to provide public comment. Sarah over here, for those of you that are in the courthouse with us and online watching the screen, will provide some indications of how much time you have left. And we do ask that folks state their name and their Douglas County residence for the meeting minutes before their comments. And we will hear from folks here in the courthouse first and then move to folks online. Anybody who's watching on Zoom should plan to use the raise your hand function to indicate to staff that you would like to make general public comment. Later in the meeting during our regular business agenda items, same procedures apply. We will have our presentation, questions from commissioners first, then open up for public comment with a 3-minute limit. Please state your name and county residence for the meeting minutes at that time. Also, the county does reserve the right to mute or remove any speaker who is rude, vulgar, or inappropriate. And a reminder that all comments should be directed at the County Commission. And for any presenters that we might have online with us, please just a reminder to introduce yourselves each time you speak as well. With that, we will go ahead and get started with our consent agenda. Does either commissioner wish to remove anything for further discussion? Okay, seeing no such indication, I will ask if anybody in the public would like to remove anything from the consent agenda. Seeing none in person, none online, Sarah. Okay, we'll go ahead and bring that back for a motion.
Motion to approve consent agenda items 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you. Was that an aye, Commissioner Portillo? Didn't quite hear you, but.
Yes, it was an aye.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll move on to general public comment. Brooke, would you mind grabbing me that sign-in sheet? Sorry, I should have asked you before the meeting started. Thank you. I noticed a few folks signed in. I'll call on them first, and then I'll double check if anybody else here with us has general public comment, and then we'll move online. Thanks, Brooke. All right, Justin, you're first.
My name is Dr. Justin Spees, and I'm running as a Republican for Douglas County District 1 Commissioner, and the seat is currently held by Democrat Patrick Kelly here. I'm known around here for starting a protest in July 2021 against the school mask mandates. I lost everything in my life because I did this, but I stood up because I believed then and still believe today that masking children is child abuse and will have serious negative consequences, and therefore it needed to be stopped. As County Commissioner, I will continue to stand up for what's right, and I've proven that. My political message is simple. I will expose and oppose these sorry excuses for leaders. If they vote yes, I'll vote no. If they vote no, I'll vote yes. They are cowards, that goes without saying, but they're also incompetent and immoral and should not be in authority. And I will expose them and oppose them and love every second of them crying about it. It would bring such joy to my heart. Vote me in as county commissioner and watch all these city and county leaders continuously cry when I call them on their shit and oppose their evil ways. And that's exactly what will happen, because I'm dead set on lowering taxes and eliminating all social welfare programs in the county that these corrupt, incompetent fools support. I believe these taxes and social welfare programs are what keep Lawrence looking and feeling like a communist dystopia, and therefore need to be ended if we are to get things turned around here. I'm not going to stand for local government taking money from Lawrence residents and giving it to social welfare programs, which destroy small businesses, ruin families, livelihoods, and lives, and burn our community all the way to the ground. I believe money should be back in the hands of residents and small business owners, not only because of the hard financial times we're all in, which will relieve stress for families. And Lord knows we all need a little less stress in our lives right now, but also so we can begin to grow this city into something nice as we relieve businesses of financial stress and keep them open, while simultaneously having extra spending money in our pockets to actually go out and enjoy these local businesses. You know, be and enjoy a capitalist society once again, instead of living in a communist nightmare. In the process, we bring down crime. As money grows tighter, we're seeing businesses move or close down for good. In their places, nothing will be left but rundown areas, poverty, and crime. We cannot allow that to happen. Speaking of communists, current District 1 Commissioner Patrick Kelly here is a USD 497 school district administrator, and he makes $122,813 a year, which is an increase from his 2020 salary of $109,938. The school district continues to be in a massive budget crisis right now that has led to an increase in teacher and staff resignations, and will also continue to impact families financially, as the district is now considering a new plan to cover cost to students' damaged iPad and MacBooks. Under the new proposal, the fees for damages to devices would be the same for everyone, regardless of family income status. The fees are as follows. High school damages would be $50 for the first occurrence, $100 for the second occurrence, and $850 for the third. Middle school damages would be $40 for the first occurrence, $80 for the second occurrence, and $300 for the third occurrence. I don't know about all you out there, but I wouldn't be able to afford that. I got an idea of how to fix this, though. Let's cut the salaries of greedy and corrupt USD 497 administrators like Patrick Kelly here. Can someone tell me why we haven't done that already? I mean, it's not rocket science. Go see for yourself. Go online. You can look up lists of how much money each one of the USD 497 administrators makes. And if you don't go, hey, wait a minute, some ain't right here. Why they make so much, but the district is a financial dumpster fire, then I don't know what to tell you.
Sue Herrick, you're next.
Hi, my name is Sue Herrick. I live here in Lawrence. I'm here tonight to ask, have any of you asked yourself why, after 2.5 years, no prophylactic guidelines have been issued by research hospitals or three-letter agencies to prevent hospitalizations from COVID? It's simple. That information has been suppressed because money motivates. A patient admitted to a hospital with COVID diagnosis brings $13,000 to that facility. A patient on a ventilator brings $39,000 on top of what is billed for their care. All of that comes from the CARES Act. With that as a template for what has happened so far, and you can fact check it as I did, what can we expect to find regarding the VAX clinics rolled out to vax infants and children right now? Hospitals were motivated financially to hospitalize. That's a fact, a really ugly fact. Our health department's similarly motivated. Given that there's a 99.997% chance that any healthy child catching COVID will recover, one wonders about the health department's motivations. Add to that these following 8 reasons not to give children in particular the vax or the jab. Reason 1, they're experimental, used only under an extended EUA right now. 2, they don't stop transmission. 3, they are only 12% effective. 4, the trials failed. 5, the CDC admits that getting vaxxed makes it more likely to become infected. 6, there's a marked increase in myocarditis and hepatitis in children after vaccinations. Let that sink in. There's a 107% greater chance of death from the vax than for COVID for children. Again, and the last one, 8, 99.997% of healthy children recover from COVID if they get infected. Dr. Jeffrey Barkey, it's spelled B-A-R-K-E, Chief Medical Officer for the Convention of States, pointed out these 8 facts and followed them by saying this: this vax makes absolutely no sense for 6-month-old children. Healthy children do not die from this illness. No one who thinks critically will vax a child. Only those brainwashed by the media and the 3-letter agencies will. The health department told me that they are following orders from the state health department, who are following directives from the CDC. Someone needs to break this cycle and save the kids. I'm trying by standing and protesting these clinics with friends. We need to grow our numbers, invite you to join us. If not you, who? When more adverse events happen to these children, how will you rationalize doing nothing? Thank you.
Steve Jacob.
First Amendment is awesome, isn't it? Anyway, My name is Steve Jacob from Lawrence. I am a Libertarian running for county commission as well. I'm just here to talk about the upcoming budget process. I just wanted to remind you and everyone that a flat mill rate is a tax increase. The mill up, we know the evaluations have gone up 10, 15%. And as we saw with the library, they weren't, as all the cash they got extra, they still couldn't keep the mill levy flat. The recession is coming if it's not here already. Come August 1st, I imagine most people's rent will be going up on top of everything else. So I know you haven't thought about where the tax money comes from up until this point, but hopefully this is the year that you start thinking about that. Thank you. Vote no, August 2nd.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here that would like to make general public comment that's in the building with us? Okay, seeing no hands, I'll double check. Oh, go ahead and come forward. Just state your name and residence for the record, please.
My name is Gene Dorsey. I'm a resident of Lawrence, Kansas. I just came up here to thank all of you for your public service. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll double check online. All right, with that, we will close general public comment and move on to our regular agenda item. I'm gonna turn it over to County Administrator Sarah Plinsky first to tell us about an item we have walking onto our agenda.
Thanks, commissioners. Before we get onto our action agenda, I had a quick last minute walk-on agenda item. As commissioners know, we approve Class B and Class C public fireworks display permits. Normally we put them on your consent agenda for review and approval. Today, we received a last minute request from John E. Connett at 1035 East 1600 Road for a public fireworks display on July 3rd. There are no concerns from zoning and codes, and they are supportive of approving the display permit. I would say that normally we get these on your regular agenda in time for the commissioners to review them. So if there are any concerns, we would need to deny the permit because we won't meet again before July 3rd. So, but staff is recommending approval, and we've spoken to Mr. Connetton, reminding him of our agenda timelines for any future displays he might have.
Thank you, Sarah. Commissioner Reed, any questions from fellow commissioners? Okay, go ahead and open this up for public comment for process. Anybody here in the building that's got public comment on this? Seeing none, is the applicant online? I forgot to ask about that. Okay, and no public comment online. All right, we'll go ahead and close that, bring it back for some discussion. I appreciate the overview, appreciate staff's flexibility. I also trust that they are very thorough in their review of these applications. So happy to make an exception this time and set clear expectations about our deadlines for future years.
I think that's fine. I mean, I appreciate you, Sarah, bringing it forward. Maybe want to give me the application so I can make a motion, or do you want us just to make a motion and say to approve the fireworks permit?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Commissioner Portillo, do you have anything to add? Okay, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the fireworks permit as outlined in the staff report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Okay, and with that, we will move on to our regularly scheduled agenda for the continued review of the American Rescue Plan Act. Brooke, are you kicking it us off?
Yep, go for it.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. If I may, I'd like to share my screen. I do have some updates from last week's meeting, most of which all of which I've included in the agenda packet for this week. I'm just going to go through each of the tabs on this workbook and outline the changes that have been made. So there was a computation error on this summary sheet, and the amount available for distribution is 14.8 million, not the originally reported 13.7 million. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. Additionally, there was some discussion around using the behavioral health sales tax fund for funding for these projects potentially. And so I wanted to also include the fund balance summary and the expected expenses through 2023 to give us a pretty good idea of where that fund will lie. And then a minimum fund balance target for that fund and potential funds available for projects through that sales tax fund. Additionally, I had another organization reach out to me and let me know that the amount that was reflected in their budget section on their proposal was not necessarily what they were asking for. And so I reached out to each of the applicants that were listed in this commissioner priority category and just asked them to confirm that what they were asking on their RFP was in fact what they were asking for the ARPA funding for. I did get a few updates. So Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority, their ask was for 3 million, not for the 4,079,000. They were going to get some additional support for that particular project. So I've gone ahead and I've updated that here. There is another one, Peasley Technology Center. They received a grant for the truck. So that knocked that request down to $197.50. So they've already purchased the truck that was included as part of their proposal. Also USD 343 in Perry LeCompton for the portable office space. They let me know that their budget has now changed to $65,000. They found some used equipment for that project. And then there was one more. Oh, Central Grazing Company, their ask is down to $1,056,000 from $1,493,500. So I just wanted to call that to your attention before we start discussing these projects and stand for any questions about that process or any of those updates.
I don't know if it would be helpful for commissioners just for Brooke to review which projects have already, by their number the number being indicated in column N, we're calling that tentatively recommended at this point. I don't have a header. We don't have a header on the column, but I think that's a pretty safe title, tentative recommendation. So you might want to just, Brooke, review which for folks that are just sort of joining us, which projects that we have in that column right now. Absolutely.
So what we've discussed before, the Baldwin Retirement Apartment Complex tentative recommendation of the 733-711, $3,250,000 for the capital acquisition for ECCC. Just Food, $325,000 for the parking lot and warehouse improvements, $3 million set aside for the Clinton Place expansion with the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority. Lawrence Habitat for Humanity, $850,000, replacement of the 2 ADA vehicles for the Senior Resource Center at $118,000 for reimbursement, $184,500 for moving expenses for the Sexual Trauma and Abuse Care Center, $35,000 for Douglas County programming for the entrepreneurial ecosystem mapping and resource mapping, $1 million for the HSC, $732,539 for the Historical Society, which includes 6 Historical Society partners. So there's a lot of collaboration there. $400,000 for construction for the Ballard Center. And I think that's where we've landed thus far for the tentative recommendations. that allocates 10,628,750 to these programs. If those are recommended programs, and that leaves $4,201,090. And I'm going to unitalicize that because it's hard to read. There we go. And that's where we've landed.
Thank you for that recap, Brooke. I appreciate it. This Commissioner Reed here, I wonder, well, first I want to ask if either commissioner has any questions about that or about what we just went over. I appreciate the recap. I'm wondering if maybe the best way to kind of tackle this, I know we have a few folks with us here today for some follow-up questions. Well, Commissioner Kelly, I see that you might have something to say while I'm formulating my thought.
Yeah. So, Sarah, are you going to go over the projects that you feel would qualify for behavioral health sales tax dollars? You showed us that, but I don't know that we talked about which projects you think would qualify for that.
Yes, commissioners, and
Thank you. And can I add to that, just kind of process timeline wise, what we think we might want to do with discussing those projects moving forward, just given the timing of our upcoming regular budget process and what staff is thinking. Thank you for articulating that, Commissioner Kelly.
I'm going to rejoin the panel just because I got it. So commissioners, the projects that I thought aligned with the stated purpose of the Behavioral Health Sales Tax Fund were the Burt Nash Project for Supportive Housing, the DECA Transitional Housing Project, and the Artists Helping the Homeless Women's Transitional Housing Unit Project. I think there are some questions that commissioners might have on those three particular projects, but of the highly rated projects by commissioners, those were the three that staff identified as being also eligible under the behavioral health sales tax. I want to be clear that the reason why I mentioned this potential use is because these would be one-time dollars associated with capital projects that could be an appropriate use of fund balance from that fund. As we have outlined, the Artists Helping Homeless Project has both capital dollars and ongoing operating dollars. I'm not supportive of using the behavioral health sales tax for ongoing, the fund balance for ongoing projects. So particularly for the Artists Helping the Homeless Project, it would only be the capital dollars. So I think there needs to be some conversation about what the operating expenses would be and whether or not there is a commitment there. In relationship to timing, certainly that is something we're going to start budget deliberations next week. So we could easily discuss those projects. I think you've got a lot of folks though that have put a lot of time and effort into this ARPA process. And, I think I would want us to have a clear understanding of which particular projects we were looking to be paid for with those funds, and some conversation around that. Because I'm afraid folks are going to feel like the one door is shut before they know if the window is open in terms of paying for those projects. So while, I don't know that I think staff could move forward towards budget preparations to prepare those projects for inclusion in the 2023 budget. I don't want folks to feel like we're just putting them off either. So is that helpful from that perspective? Okay.
I think so. Does that bring up any questions for fellow commissioners? So I really like the idea that these three projects, which were highly rated by all of us, and I think have some varying degrees of questions and feasibility to kind of figure out, but appreciate that we've got some other eligible one-time dollars we can use and free up some of these. So I just want to confirm with other commissioners that that's generally how they're feeling, and that we can put those three projects kind of in a pool together for some not too distant continued conversation.
Sarah, just this Commissioner Kelly, just some clarification on the second tab of the worksheet that Brooke shared. Oh, maybe it's not there. Okay, never mind. I'm okay. Yeah, I was just making sure I've got the right three. It's DCCA's, Artists Helping the Homeless, and Burton Ash are the three
Correct.
that you're recommending, right?
Yeah, but I think you should have some conversation, particularly about AAH and Burton Ash before staff feels comfortable.
I want to have some conversation about those and where they belong and
what dollar amounts and if they're contingent, you know, if we want to place any restrictions on how those funds would be used or what those decisions, I think this is an opportunity to try to begin those conversations. And if we need to find or follow up with more information, we can certainly do so.
Commissioner Portillo, I can't see you on the screen because it's shared screen, but I just want to double check if you have any thoughts you want to relay about this topic.
No, I appreciate the clarification, Sarah, and would like to have continued discussions about those three projects. Because just from a process standpoint, then do you want to talk about those three now or remove those from the ARPA discussion and finish up the ARPA discussion first? So I guess ARPA or behavioral health tax, which one are we gonna discuss first?
If I can jump, I think we've got people here, Commissioner Portillo, and it's okay with Commissioner Reed. I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about some of these projects and just ask a few questions on them. And it seems like it's part of ARPA. If we decide to move it later, I think that's fine. But I think folks are here and I'd like to hear from them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, with that, I think Lori, I see you over here. So would you like to come up and we'll just talk about the DECA project first? And we'll move across the room.
Good evening. I'm Lori Alvarado, CEO at DECA. With me tonight is Nick McGovern, our facilities director, and Ed Lobdell, who is our substance use disorder director for our project. So we can do a quick overview for you, or I know you are aware of what we're proposing. How would you like to move forward? We got a picture, obviously. So.
Thank you for that. I always like a visual. I think that you've provided us with a lot of good information ahead of time. So if it's all right with you, we can just dive into some questions.
Absolutely.
I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Kelly and then Commissioner Portillo and see what questions you both have.
Lori, if you could walk us through, your project was interesting in that you have some other funding already identified and some funding goals identified. Could you sort of walk us through all that? And the question that came up, I think 2 weeks ago for us was the level of, we sort of talked about the level of confidence you have in raising those dollars, right? So if we put 800,000 to this project and something else, and it doesn't happen, then that was $800,000 we didn't put to another project. Can you just sort of talk about that a little bit?
I can, and I would tell you, as you all know, funding and the timing of funding is always a little fluid. So we have intentions of applying because of the timeline when we plan to start construction of the housing units. We have a plan to apply for City of Lawrence affordable housing funding. We also are in conversation with a couple of national foundations who are very interested in the project. We are beginning, well, actually last fall, we did a soft kickoff for public donors, or private donors, sorry. And we'll do another round of private donor event in the fall. And we also have some funds that we will be talking to the state about in regards to housing and helping with the capital expenses. And then finally, DECA has some funds that we have also set aside and pledged. It is our belief that a private-public partnership is most effective for a project like this. We believe that having more partners in this effort will actually make it a much stronger partnership. We have been in conversations with tenants to homeowners. They would be our property manager and help us with managing the property. DECA would own the units. And so we are developing those partnerships as we speak. If you ask me, do I have that money secured right now? I can tell you, no, I have some of it secured. Some of it is, quote, pledged, and some of it is awaiting for timelines for us to apply. Yeah, the land, we own the land.
Oh, that's what I was just
sorry.
going to clarify.
We
that
own
you
the
already
land.
own the land, right?
Yes, ma'am.
It's Commissioner Kelly again, and Sarah talked about using that behavioral health sales tax dollars. Was part of the funding that you were thinking about down the line coming from that behavioral sales tax? Or was that not included? Or do you have any thoughts on whether we should use behavioral sales tax dollars for this?
I've had multiple conversations with Sarah Plinsky, Bob Tryansky about this housing plan. It's really always been in the behavioral health plan to have affordable housing for people who are in recovery. And I would just say a couple of things. The reason why this housing is incredibly important to those who are in recovery, if anyone has a felony drug charge, they are ineligible to live in any public housing, including Section 8. If they are on medication assisted treatment, they are banned from living in Oxford houses or other sobriety housing. So we have women and children who are in precariously housed situations leaving our facility in a new recovery process that requires an incredible amount of support to continue with nowhere to live with children. So that's why this is important. There are no other housing options available for people who have a felony drug charge. And that is something that is not an uncommon thing with our clientele. So we are faced with sending people back out onto the street, oftentimes where they became addicted, back into that housing situation. So this is one of those things that have been a conversation with the behavioral health plan from the beginning. We had talked about some money from the behavioral health sales tax at the beginning, and in conversation when the ARPA money came up with staff, they suggested that we apply here. Of course, there was no way of knowing that the county would receive more than 4 times requests for money than what was available. So the conversation has been back and forth. We did apply for more money than what we originally talked about in behavioral health tax. And I will tell you that has everything to do with the projected costs of building prior to COVID and the projected costs now. They have close to doubled. And so that is why when you say, do I have the funding secured? When I'm talking about twice the amount of money, all of a sudden my fundraising issues have become much bigger. So we're diligent, we're having those conversations. And so I don't have a preference. I will tell you, I think the behavioral health tax would maybe give us more flexibility in timing. And I'm looking at Sarah for that confirmation. Yeah. So if some of that other funding was a little bit slow in coming, that would give us more flexibility. The $800,000 is basically the infrastructure. So it's the utilities, the streets, the water, right, sewer, extra fire hydrant, all those things. So it's really the infrastructure. It's not, we did not apply for any money for the actual construction.
Lori, I also want to clarify, it was in all of our, I think everything that Lori has said is accurate into our conversations. In addition to that, DECA has never really indicated that they will need help for ongoing operations of this transitional housing.
That continues to be our hope.
So. Hope. I like that
I'm
word.
trying. I have learned in this world, you never promise, but that is our hope.
Thank you, Lori. Any questions from you, Commissioner Portillo? No. I don't have any questions either. I really appreciate you helping suss that out. From from my perspective, especially given some of what you just shared with us, the behavioral health sales tax does make a lot of sense for this. And I appreciate your flexibility with us kind of evolving this conversation as ARPA has sort of created for us. I think in particular, because of that timing flexibility that you just mentioned, that to me makes even more sense, just in case there is more delay than you expect for some of those other fundraising pieces, that the ARPA dollars are fundamentally more restricted in terms of that timing. So I appreciate you all coming tonight and being available for questions.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to apply and to share with you this evening.
Okay, I see Matthew. You want to go ahead and come up and we can talk about the Bert Nash project a bit? Hi, Matthew, thanks for joining us. We know you've been here with us a couple of times, so appreciate you coming back again. I wondered if you could just help me understand the difference in the amount requested initially, which was around 5 million, or maybe actually closer to 6 million, I think, and that the request is actually for $1 million. Can you just talk about the difference in that, and then sort of what today's status quo about how you see this project moving forward and other investments?
Yeah, so our intention from the beginning was only the original $1 million, and maybe that was my mistake in filling out the application. The total amount listed was simply to display the full project assessed amount. And again, maybe it was my mistake that there wasn't an actual place to explicitly say I'm asking for $1 million. I tried to clarify that throughout the application. But I guess the short answer is that we haven't amended our ask. Our initial ask was for $1 million. I think I'll talk about our project, but I think it's important to talk about housing more widely. In the preparation for ARPA funds, the work group that was charged with looking at acquisitions and development for the community's wider housing project was split up into a few categories. One was short-term, one was long-term. And all the proposals here tonight, I believe, are more longer-term. And I would say all of them are extremely important for meeting that longer-term housing vision. So I support all these projects. Ours is a longer-term project, and for all intents and purposes, we're still kind of at the beginning of that process. As of last week, I have submitted a formal request for land donation to the city of Lawrence. We have been in contact with planning and development, and we've been vetting a few sites that we think would be ideal or would work for this project. And so we're working through that. Initially, we thought we would have a date for July 12th to get in front of the commission, but they want to do a few more things internally, maybe need us some more time before they put that in on the commission's table to vote on that. So that being the process for securing a site, we hope that's successful. That also solidifies a further partner in this project that would include the city and the county if this is successful. And I think that's extremely important to consider, that I guess furthers the relationship that we all have in pursuing services for folks who have housing issues and mental health issues and substance use issues in the community. We, like DECA, are seeking funds from national foundations. We will be pursuing funds through the State Home Program, and we will be pursuing funds through a private, fundraising on our own. We will also be dedicating Bert Nash dollars to that, and there's a few opportunities for us to pursue that. We may liquidate a property that we own in order to do some of that. But I think we are dedicated to this. This is a project we are going to pursue. Long-term wise, this is an extremely sustainable project for us, and it's a fundamental part of our growth as an agency to provide housing for folks with severe and persistent mental illness. And it's a model that we're looking to implement that will allow us to fund our own projects without any outside support going on. I would agree with Lori. I don't want to make any promises, but I'm extremely confident when looking at our existing housing services and our community-based services and our shift to CCBHC, that we will be successful in sustaining our own funds for further housing development in the permanent supportive housing arena. And this will serve as the cornerstone project to launch that process. So again, this is a longer term plan. In respect to questions about where the funds come from, whether it's behavioral health or ARPA, I have no qualms. Our interest is in making sure over the long haul that this project is realized. Yes, we have a lot more flexibility from one from the other. That's great. Our commitment is to getting the project done. So whether the money comes from Pot A or Pot B is not of concern for us. So I would say probably of all of the long-term projects, this was the one that was least developed. The DECA project has been in development since we started the Transitions project. And so this was a project that we, as about a year and a half ago, well, 2 years ago, at the end of, when we saw kind of the light at the end of the tunnel with Transitions, we started thinking about what's our next clientele need in its permanent supportive housing. And then in our conversations with the wider community about who's going to provide permanent supportive housing, who's going to fit that role in the community, internally we're like, well, that should be us, because that's what we do. That's what community-based services are through mental health centers, is permanent supportive housing. The difference is that normally we don't own the housing. It's the landlord owns the housing. And this brings the housing back into ownership of the nonprofit, in which we can control the cycle of eviction, right? We, as the property owner, can make the choice not to evict somebody. We can be much more lenient with somebody if they're relapsing or if they're having a bad day or whatever's going on in their life. And in my work with homelessness, that's one of the major significant differences that we're going to have to make as a community to help prevent the cycle of relapsing into homelessness, is finding a housing model that allows us a lot more flexibility in working with our clientele as renters, so that the evictions are going to happen in the private market. It's totally understandable, and I support landlords in that process. They're protecting their business and their assets. And for a certain clientele, folks who are more acute, that's probably never going to work. So this is our attempt to fill that gap and make sure that as a community, we have that resource going forward in a robust and sustainable way, and that we have the ability as an agency to continue to expand that resource as needed. So when we do need to build a few more units, we have the capacity to do that without really being so heavily burdened by the process of needing to go out and raise money. So again, I don't want to make promises, but I'm very, very confident in our performa and that this is going to be a very sustainable project. So,
thank you. Questions from you, Commissioner Kelly? Commissioner Portillo? Okay. Well, I really appreciate that further explanation and some context about timeline. To me, as has been discussed, I mean, it does align well with the behavioral health sales tax in terms of, especially given the fact that you acknowledge it's a longer term plan and maybe a little bit less developed than some of the already owned land or ready to purchase land. So I think that, again, similarly with DECA, that the behavioral health sales tax would provide some more flexibility in terms of administering those funds rather than using ARPA. Sarah?
Commissioners, my only comment, and we can wait and talk about this sort of at the end, there were conversations about timing of how the funds all come together and or, if I think there's some concerns from commissioners that, if projects don't materialize as much as all great hopes come together, how do we want to have some provisions that allow for us to wait and sort of see that we can pledge that the funds have been provided, and then wait till documentation and further project development comes together and then outlay the funds?
Yeah, so I see these projects as being a little different. And
okay.
Matt, I heard you say that the DECA project is more developed. It has, very much further along than this is. So it may be I'm not recommending anything just yet, but I think it may be us committing in one area and another area saying, yeah, this is the place we're headed, but with the city's partnership, it just needs more time to sort of get more developed is what I'm hearing, but we may place something in that behavioral health sales tax to continue to work on it. And at least we know, I mean, part of, if nothing, it's not like nothing came out of a good application. We just keep moving on and we're still talking about it. So that's, I'm probably given where my head is a little way too much before we've heard from everybody, but it's just something that's going on in my head.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I guess at some point in time, we would like a commitment of some funds somewhere. Again, I don't care where it comes from. We don't care where it comes from. But that is what makes project happen. So at some point in time, yeah, we would be looking for it.
Is that, but the notion that we would perhaps pledge, you know, if there was a decision made, but the funds would be held until the whole project came together. You don't have any concerns with that?
Not
Matthew?
at all. And I think we kind of had a similar arrangement with transitions that there was an agreement that, hey, we'll be there when you're ready. And if you're ready. So, yeah.
All right. Commissioner Reed, I appreciate the conversation. Thanks for being with us here again tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Karwu, would you like to join us for some discussion about your proposal for Artists Helping the Homeless?
Hi, my name is Karwu. Can I say I'm nervous? Anyway, my project is pretty simple. The reason why we are thinking about starting this project is because a few years back, we started the similar project for the male populations. And that we had a very good success rate for the people that we served. So that we look at the female population in Douglas County. And so the female population's homelessness challenges is higher than national average. It's like 51% versus 39%. So that's why we had the conversation on creating this program that we done for the male already to replicate that for female. And our program's idea is to really reduce the homelessness, address the recovery as well as the reentry challenges in Douglas County. We have two phases of that program. The first phase is what I call the first phase house, so we can immediately get them into a house, so we can kind of provide wraparound services and help them get back on their feet. Our goal is also to help them thrive, not to survive. I think it's important that we give them a long-term success instead of a short-term gain. So then the second phase is so that they can have the opportunity once they get the first phase done while they are still looking for housing. Obviously, Lawrence has some little bit more challenge of the space and availability for long-term housing so that we can still allow them to have a second phase. So there they can kind of become getting used to a long-term independent living, learning all the skills and things like that. So this way that when they move to a longer term housing, they have all the skills and all the jobs. One of the things I want to emphasize on the program that we serve the male, majority of them that we work with that purchase their cars, they actually, a few of them purchase their own homes over time in the last 2-3 years. So that's what we try to do. And so when we partner with like everybody in this room here, so it is a teamwork so that we can really move the population we like to serve towards a positive environment. And our project is a little bit simpler because we don't have to build anything. We just purchase existing homes so that we can move them in right away. And so we provide like case managers as well as peer support that the people that have lived in that environment already, so they have better understanding of what the people we serve going through. And I think that's also very important, having that understanding and that empathy for the people that we work with. And so it could be a two-phase so that we can get the first phase going right away and then maybe slowly get the second phase going as well. And so that we can kind of moving the the people that we serve forward in a longer term solution as well. And so that's like we were talking about earlier, there's two phases of you have the capital funding or acquiring the property, as well as the operating expenses and the management team and the case manager. And we also provide transportation, which is a really important part of the challenge that these people that we serve, because a lot of time we talk about transportation, but we don't do that. I mean, we all recognize that's a challenge, but we don't have a driver, we don't have a van, we don't have a car to serve them. The simple things like going to see your PO or going to see your social worker is a challenge also. So we do provide all those, and we try our best to take them all to like Deckers or whatever service that they needed to see their counselor and things like that. So for them to grow in the long term, I think those basic support is really important. We might take that for granted if we can do it ourselves simply, but for the people that is on the street in recovery or in reentry, it is a huge challenge for them. So I think that we created this program for male in the last 3 years, and we find out that it really worked for the population we serve. That's why we're trying to bring the same concept to replicate that for the female population. And when I read the statistic, I was so surprised that the female population is actually higher than the national average that is facing this challenge. So I don't know whether I can answer any question. I'm just a little nervous.
No, it's okay. Thank you, Karwu. It's okay to be nervous. I still get nervous before these meetings sometimes. Yeah. Thank you for being here. Will you speak to us a little bit about, so we're talking about one-time expenses. Certainly that's what the commission has talked about, the ARPA dollars in particular being targeted towards, because there is not going to be any budget source or revenue source for ongoing expenses. So that's what we focused on. The project you've proposed, as you just mentioned, has both capital costs and ongoing costs. If whether through ARPA or the Behavioral Sales Tax Fund, if the county were to provide capital costs, what is your prospect, or what are your options for ongoing cost expenses for the case managers, the peer counselors, just the ongoing overhead expenses of those?
And so just like every nonprofit organization, we have to go out there to source funding. Our funding source right now in our own program in Kansas City is 1/3 our funding is from corporate individual donors. 1/3 our funding is from foundations. 1/3 of them is from government supports. So it is a manageable solution. It might take a little bit of time to look for those, but over time we have been able to do that on our ongoing process.
And we're talking about two different properties, a phase 1 house and a phase 2 house. Do you have properties in mind or prospects of those, or is that something you have begun the search for yet?
I have been working on it the last 4 weeks. Yes, I have some property in mind, but I didn't want to kind of commit to until we get the final decisions.
Okay. Commissioner Kelly, do you have any questions?
So, Karwu, I agree that the homelessness rate is alarming, but I'm looking at another set of data around our jail and how many females are in the jail, and that population is much lower than the number of males we have in the jail. And my recollection of the Artists Helping the Homeless is it's specifically focused on reentry. Are you expanding your focus? Because it sounds like we have 2 homes for males now, right? And then doing 2 homes for females. I'm trying to figure out how you got to equal when what we're seeing coming out of the jail.
Well, I think I want to emphasize in our program in Kansas City, most of our population is actually come from hospitals and detox and inpatients. And we actually started as a hospital diversion program. So we help the hospital discharge patients because those patients, I mean, realistically, in dollars and cents, each emergency room visit is minimum $1,200 to $2,000. And each ambulance ride in Kansas is $1,200. If you can reduce those repetitive in the hospitals, and that's why we're building the crisis center for the same reason. But I actually work with the crisis center in Kansas City, and they actually call us as well to help serve the population. Once they stay in the crisis center for 24, 48 hours, where do they go? And so here in Lawrence, we tend to focus more on reentry, but our overall population is really hospital detox, inpatient, as well as reentry population. So as we expand this program, we can definitely get a little bit more involved in the hospital side, and maybe with teaming with everybody's here.
Yeah, that's, you sort of answered what was going to be my second question, is how we're working with other organizations that are sort of working in that different space of more, I mean, DCCA is asking for a women's facility. So, you know, that I just want to make sure we've aligned all our services here, that we're working together on that. So that's just where my question is.
Yeah, so I think it's important. That's why we kind of like work together as a team to kind of work through these challenges. Like I use the crisis center as an example. It's like, okay, you put them in for 48 hours, what are you going to do with them afterwards? And things like that can come up as well. So in Kansas City, that's what we do. We continue to work through those. So we reduce the cost of going back to the hospitals, or going back to keep using the services over and over again.
Commissioner Portillo, any questions?
No, I think Commissioner Kelly's questions covered mine. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Karwu, thank you for being here. You can go ahead and have a seat since we don't have any more questions for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Karwu.
Now I don't have to be nervous.
Any further discussion about that project in particular, or these three projects that we sort of discussed together from fellow commissioners, just about next steps and any direction for staff? I guess I want to ask, I'm looking at staff. Do you feel like we've covered it and the discussion has been clear with our responses?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still going to wait for some direction.
Yeah. So maybe here's where I'm feeling comfortable with the DCCA. And I know sometimes I leave out one C, and I apologize for that. I'm feeling good, you know, making a pledge of that $800,000 from the mental health side. I think, or not even a pledge allocated, but we'll have to do it during our budget portion. I'd like to see a little more development on the Burt Nash one, and I think they admitted to that one, so it can be that soft, maybe like the pledges that Lori's getting, you know, that, yeah, we're working towards that. The Artists Helping the Homeless one, I just want more time on. I think that one needs to be developed more. I want to see a little more data around support for that and understand how those services are working together. When we got that application, I hadn't heard a whole lot about that and reentry from the jail. We didn't hear from the sheriff on that. So I understand what Karwu is saying, that's a new part of that program, but I just want to make sure it aligns with the other services that we have out there. So that's sort of my ranking of those three.
Yes, Commissioner Reed, I appreciate that. And I think I would agree. To me, DECA's project really rose to the top along with a few others in the initial reading, and it seems pretty ready to go, and we'll hope that all those other funding sources come through. Burt Nash, I think that pledge for now and continuing to workshop, and then would agree that Artists Helping the Homeless, I certainly appreciate the idea of it and would like to move towards having more equitable substance use focused housing supports for women in our community. And I think one difference between DECA's project and what Artists Helping the Homeless is proposing, maybe that DECA's is focused on women with children in particular, which would not necessarily, and it would be individual single adults. But I agree that there's definitely some more in-depth conversation and kind of workshopping and development. And also just, I'm curious about more, well, to your point, Commissioner Kelly, like a perspective from our own departments within the county and then other agencies about that need and the data that supports that need to make sure we're being targeted. So with that, Commissioner Portillo, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's incredibly consistent with where I'm at on this, that the DECA proposal seems ready to go. Bert Nash is very much in process, and the Artists Helping the Homeless, I'd like just a bit more information about how that fits in with other programs within the community, and then long-term kind of how our operational costs going to be covered when services increase for the agency. I think that we're all in a pretty consistent place.
Great. Any questions from us about those three projects, staff?
I think that makes sense, and I think that's helpful for Brooke and I. I would just say that if commissioners are hoping to get additional information on Artists Helping the Homeless in advance of our 2023 budget discussions starting next week, I want to give Karwu that timeline now. I think it's a pretty quick turnaround to have some of those conversations, and since we're talking about fund balance, I don't need to, but I just want to be, I think we've scheduled time for Karwu to come next week for budget, but he doesn't have a supplemental ask or any requests and additional funds requests inside the budget.
I think since it's not a supplemental request in front of us, I don't know that it does feel like a quick turnaround to dig in deeper to that conversation. And like, there's just a lot of sort of missing elements and information. So maybe we.
Yeah, I agree. I think like from what I'm hearing, you're looking for a little more fully fleshed out proposal about how this fits into our total supportive housing conversation. And, I'd like to have Jill as a part of that conversation. Mm-hmm. I just want to be really clear. I don't think I'm going to have additional information for you for this project by next week. But since we're talking about fund balance and there are future budget years, I don't know that that means that, anything specific, but I just want to be clear that I don't think I'll have anything more for you by next week.
I'm okay if we don't have anything more. I think this is a good, this is a part of the conversation, and we need to just keep having it. And I'm not sure if this was brought to us as a budget proposal, I'm not sure I would support it then either. So I think we just need more work on it.
Sounds good. I think we're clear.
Well, to keep us on the conversation of housing, I noticed that Rebecca Buford with Tenants to Homeowners is with us, and that was something that we didn't dedicate a specific amount to, but all of us indicated in our meeting last week that was a high priority for all three commissioners. So I'd like to propose that we talk about that one next and kind of see where we land with that and see if that adjusts our numbers at all for tentative recommendations. Rebecca, you want to come up and join us, please? And we'll thank you for the response to staff's questions about sort of partial funding and some additional follow-up that we've had. I'll just give you an opportunity to give us a sort of short recap of where things stand today and what Tenants to Homeowners priorities are moving forward with this request.
Sure. Thank you, commissioners. Rebecca Buford with Executive Director of Tenants to Homeowners. We know we need supportive service housing supply, and we were looking to what's the quickest way to get there. And I think the one answer there was that we spent the last year looking at potential sites where we could develop new, and some of those sites already had homes that maybe needed some work, but that sounded good because that's a shorter timeline than brand new development. Some of those units or lots also might have a small house on it that would fit very well for supportive service housing, but with our density bonus, we could actually build another new house. So those were ideal sites as well. Those are all in our priorities. When you said if you couldn't get full funding, what would you suggest? There are 4 sites of the 15 we originally requested money for that the situation has changed a little bit. I want to say I will have no trouble finding additional sites in this real estate market. So if we want that many units, that can happen. But if you were struggling to give, said we cannot fully fund, but we can give partial funding, I wanted to give you a number, that those would be the first I would take out of my priority list. But the need is so great. Again, I feel like if you give us our full request, we will have no problem as developers finding some additional lots. For example, 2 lots that were on our list were sold about a month ago. We can find more lots. So that's just an example of, yes, that particular lot, I can't sign a contract on, but I also said they were sold, but they haven't been developed yet. So I could probably approach the new owner. And so again, the numbers may change a little bit, but I think we can get to we can use every dollar of those requests in. And I hope I didn't confuse things. The 1 million is for rehabilitation, but that would be of an asset that would then be a one-time real asset. So that's not supportive services or something that would need to be repeated. That was just, I was breaking down acquisition cost, actual number to buy a unit versus what I'm expecting we would need to rehabilitate and get it rental ready. So I guess what other questions do you guys have on that?
I had a question about that rehabilitation money. Do you foresee any potential timeline issues in terms of how long it might, acquiring property? It's a pretty quick, fast thing to do, right? The money, you have the money, you spend the money, and it's accounted for. Rehabilitation projects, depending on what they're involved, supply chain, there's just a lot more layers to it. So do you foresee any concerns or issues that if allocated all of your full request, do you have any concerns you'd be able to spend that down in time for the sites that you would be rehabbing and not doing brand new development on?
I don't really worry about that. We would prioritize that to meet those deadlines. And we would focus on those first. I mean, obviously we need to acquire those, but immediately go into rehab would kind of be phase 1 while we're developing, which is creating plans or using plans we already have and going through the development process to build new. So we could absolutely focus on that first to ensure we have enough time to address any supply issues. In our new construction, we've been able to, sometimes it's just, there's only stainless steel refrigerators, but we can find them. And so it's a matter of, making sure we've got the funding. And that's where a lot of the leverage funding that is going to come with this project would allow us to adapt to that too. We are not expecting every dollar from the county to cover all of the projects. And I do think that's where a benefit of ours as a community housing development organization, that federal home funds, state home funds, pretty much all of the big pots of recovery money that allow for housing development, we have gotten before. We are a consistent player in applying for those funds, and we will go after as many of those funds as we can to leverage with these acquisition dollars.
Thank you. I just had one other question. You didn't give us full addresses, which I totally understand. I think they're all Lawrence addresses, but will you just verify for me if there are any that are in other communities throughout the county? And if not, were those just difficult to identify and find?
I think, yes, the need is great throughout the county. It is probably greater in Lawrence. And since if we are maintaining and creative supportive service housing programs, our home base is in the Lawrence community. So I want to pilot that here and then use what we've learned in creating these collaborations with these other partners to extend that into the community. We do now manage 24 senior units in Baldwin, and that's allowing us to learn kind of the housing market there. And I think that's something that we could certainly prioritize to get in, since if some of these aren't available, we could certainly prioritize that as one of the other acquisitions we could look to get.
Thanks, Rebecca. Questions from other commissioners?
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Well, this time, I guess I would like to check in with fellow commissioners and see if there are other projects you want to discuss and maybe ask some further questions of here, or if we want to talk about the tenants to homeowners one first and then move on to some of the other ones that are indicated in those high priority lines. Thoughts?
So, I mean, I'm very supportive of the tenants to homeowners. This is a real great opportunity. It's capital, but we've seen a huge impact on housing in Douglas County. And I appreciate the work tenants to homeowners does, the number of properties here. We had the supportive housing needs assessment, and this aligns to that. I'm very supportive of their full ask on that, but open to hearing other commissioners' thoughts on that.
Commissioner Portillo, I would say the same thing. I hear what Rebecca said around some of those properties are no longer available because they're already sold, but there could be additional properties that come up. And so I think that tenants to homeowners has a really strong pulse on what's happening in our community. And this is exactly the kind of ask that we need based off of what we saw from our housing study.
I would concur with both of you. I think we all indicated early on that this was a top project for us. So appreciate understanding kind of how the decisions were made about properties so far and what some other opportunities are moving ahead as things with the real estate market continue to fluctuate. And I'm excited about the opportunity that this proposal brings for just adding a whole lot of new inventory and sort of contributing in a big way to having truly permanently supportive housing that will stay in a land trust and that will be protected county investment dollars. So I would support the full amount too. And which brings us to about $1 million left, maybe a little less than that, huh, Brooke, once we add that in.
$907,000.
Thank you.
And so this may be risky, but I'm going to give it a go. So one of the requests we had, and we generated support around last week, was around our historical societies. And just for a bit of a reminder, that was actually, a lot of those were a budget request last year that came to us. And then we said, go to ARPA funds. And so as I'm thinking about some of these projects and thinking if, we have 900,000, we're in that 900, if we wanted a little more play, I visited with Sarah a little bit about as we've seen our budgets are coming around. Do we want to look at maybe taking that back to the budget and looking at maybe some fund balances or something there? I just offer that. I don't want to open a Pandora's box, which I'm a little worried about. But I think that was one that had come through the budget process already. And then we pushed it to ARPA, and just thought I'd offer that to commissioners for something to think about. It's a one-time cost, and our fund balances in our budget are sometimes used to address that one-time cost.
I appreciate you floating that idea. And I'd say, I mean, my reaction to that is that I feel I'm open to that. I think that you're right. We absolutely asked them to submit those same requests through ARPA. We did that, I think, with a number of folks in the past year and a half in anticipation of these dollars. And as was pointed out earlier this evening, we were sort of overwhelmed with the amount of requests we got. So we've had to be really creative and diligent about how we think of where those dollars might come from. So I guess I'd like to hear from staff also, like, you know, we're starting our budget conversations and hearings next week. Maybe it would be helpful for me as a newer commissioner, especially to kind of understand use of fund balance for one-time expenses and other examples of that with community partners that we've had that haven't necessarily made a supplemental request but maybe off-cycle requests, if that's relevant.
Yeah, thanks, commissioners. Yeah, you know, this isn't something that we've done a ton in the past, frankly, because our fund balances really have not been able to support it. As the commission knows, we've been on a concerted effort to increase our fund balances from pretty low amounts to what I consider still very reasonable amounts of around 18 to 20%. I don't think it's going to spoil Austin's story too much to share that the 2023 proposed budget includes an 18% fund balance in the general fund. So at that range, I am comfortable with entertaining, and we have always looked at one-time requests in the past, but they've generally been smaller amounts. So it is pretty easy for us to accommodate reasonable. So I'd say requests under $1 million on a one-time basis through a budget process. I am comfortable with us having the conversation related to historical societies in the budget, if that's what the commission desires. What I would just say is that, you know, I don't have, what I have for those proposals is what you have in your ARPA packet. I don't have any, you know, what your traditional budget materials but we do have their, you know, their kind of community partner summary information for all their ongoing operating in there. So what I would probably just ask is, we are looking to schedule the historical societies to come in for a budget presentation. So they're already planning on coming in next week. So I do think we could have that conversation next week if that's what the commission prefers.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around why we might want to shift from ARPA to fund balance after we had the conversation last year asking these folks to apply for ARPA dollars. I recognize that may allow us to fund more things on ARPA, but we're also looking to do other things with our budget. So I think we've already shifted some things from ARPA onto the behavioral health sales tax. And so I'm not sure that it makes sense for us to keep kind of paring down the ARPA list rather than putting some of these things on ARPA, but I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Well, one of the reasons I suggest this is, I think at the last week's meeting, we had talked a little bit about the Community Children's Center request, and I had pulled that back a little bit because I was worried that we were getting over our total amount, and I was trying to figure out a way. It seemed like the other two commissioners maybe had some interest in more funding of renovations. We may not. I mean, that may be fine, but I just wanted to be thinking about, as we get, you know, here's where we get down to the end and the dollars really here at the end. Do we want to have that flexibility? I'm with you, Commissioner Portillo. We can leave it in there. It's cleaner, it feels like, to leave it in there. But, you know, we didn't have a request from the Community Children's Center last year on our budget. So that's where I was like, oh, is there anything that we may be able to sort of give ourselves a little wiggle room here as we get down to the end? And that was just my thinking. What you're saying is exactly right, but I was just trying to find, as we get down to the end, how we accommodate, you know, some of those requests and trying to honor what some other commissioners have brought up.
This is Commissioner Reed. I appreciate the discussion, and I think, I mean, I also had some thoughts in going back through this, trying to, now that we know our budget hearings are happening and we have each commission has the budget, trying to compare which of those requests are similar to or maybe recent or previous requests through our normal budget. I think, well, to Commissioner Kelly's point, it gets a little tricky down at the end of the line, I suppose, with how to allocate these last few dollars. So, but appreciate your point, Commissioner Portillo, and think that we did come to a decision about those items and that one-time request making sense. And also, as far as the early childhood care center, that I think, while I'm certainly supportive of that project overall, that I think we came to a good balanced decision about that in terms of being able to fund the acquisition of that property and really make a significant investment without funding the entirety of it, so that we could spread some of those dollars around. So with that, I wonder if either commissioner has any of the other sort of high priority items that they want to discuss, raise any further questions about, or advocate for. Again, I'll throw out there that I'm really supportive still of the Peaslee Tech request, and that being lower now in particular. It would like to help them move forward with that. And then the significantly lower dollar amount request also that we got from Perry LeCompton for the one-time cost of that portable office space. I would be supportive of those two smaller amounts.
I'd be interested in maybe having a quick conversation about central grazing. I think, that's a pretty creative project, and just would like to get some sense from the commission. The number is higher than I'm comfortable, even the revised number, but I wonder if there's some opportunity to put some dollars towards this. As I look through the request, there are some levels of just purchasing the land, and maybe that's a good start on this project. So I just want to checking to see if other commissioners have an interest in it.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Kelly. This is Commissioner Reed. I do have an interest in that project, and I think that the idea of a localized and intentionally built meat processing facility in our community is it's a creative project. I think it's a layered one that addresses economic issues, environmental issues, and helps support farmers in our community, along with access to some locally raised and processed food. So I think there's a lot of benefits to it. I would agree that I think we're in a space of needing to pare down that number if we were to make a commitment. And so, but I am interested in Douglas County being a part of that investment, because I think it's an important plan for our community, and I can see a lot of potential in it. And I think that it will leverage a lot of additional dollars through USDA grants that have been mentioned to us, and then probably other investors too that will come to our community along with that project. I'm going to scramble to pull up that request again, just to look at the kind of breakdown of amounts though, because I don't have a number in my head.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I agree that that's a really interesting and creative request. I found some of the discussions around how this may center BIPOC and farmers of color really interesting, but a bit underdeveloped in the discussion overall. So I'm not opposed to funding this in any way, but I was wondering if we could kind of talk through what are the kind of collaborative aspects that have already happened and what are our expectations for collaboration, since collaboration is one of the things that we really focused on in our evaluation of these projects. Is that something that we're expecting out of this project? I hear you that it does hit a number of other goals, including economic development, and I think that it is really creative. And the time to potential agrivoltaics, as we're looking at a potential increase in solar in our community, I found really interesting. I agree the price tag is still very high, even at the reduced amount. So I would be interested if we could provide some funds towards it, but maybe not that full ask.
Commissioners, I do see that Jacqueline Smith from Central Grazing Company is here with us this evening. And so I wonder if we want to offer a few moments to ask some of those questions about collaboration and maybe about a number, a reduced number. Okay, I'm seeing some head nods. Jacqueline, you want to join us? Can you just speak to some of those questions that we just discussed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the project, what we're asking from the county is really at the development stage of this. We need to get together the resources for the feasibility study that is going to be that network into the USDA and the USDA grants and also the USDA loan programs that are available for meat processing. There's a tremendous amount of federal funds coming down to help support local meat processing. As we witnessed, there's a crisis, a food crisis looming, and a meat processing facility would help secure food for Douglas County residents and surrounding counties as well. It's a very vital county asset that we need. The land is something that we could find another source of funding for. That would probably be the easiest way to reduce that budget, because there's opportunities for us to be able to get that land purchase covered. My goal is to create a non-consolidable, like a piece of infrastructure that cannot be consolidated. And the path forward with using county ARPA funds and then resourcing USDA loans would allow us to avoid bringing on additional investors that would need to have a return on their investment and require us to eventually consolidate. So this is a very important way and clever way that we can try to get this to remain as a community asset for Douglas County and our food systems.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So did I hear you right that you think the land would be something you would eliminate from the request if you had to and found a different path for funding the land?
Yes.
Did I understand that right?
Yes, I think that we could figure out a way through some of those challenges for sure.
Do you have an idea of, and I'm sorry, I don't have it pulled up right in front of me. I think maybe Commissioner Kelly is looking at it, but approximately how much you expect land to cost, and so what that would bring the number down by?
Well, we are expecting to need around 5 acres for this land development. The original piece of land that we were looking at was actually 30 acres, and we were going to develop multiple different functions for that, for community aspect, to have accessible spaces to come in and learn about the food system and be part of that whole food cycle. So if we look at just providing the land that we need for the processing facility, it's around 5 acres that we need.
You have an idea of what cost? I know that you can't be specific about it without knowing an exact property, but about how much of that, the revised number you gave us without the cut and wrap facility was just a little over 1 million. Mm-hmm. So how much without land, about how much would you expect that to bring the
I would expect that budget to be around 50 to 75,000 if we went for that size acreage.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Portillo. So it sounds like a good investment at this point may be that feasibility study to really see how this might fit into our community and continuing with those development pieces. Is that what I'm hearing, Jacqueline?
Yeah, it would be really, this project at this level of what we're asking for the county is to invest in the food systems through the feasibility study, which also requires hiring consultants to help us write some of the USDA guidelines, because it's a highly restricted and monitored system. And so we need to develop standards for HACCP and food safety modernization that we're going to have to find consultants to help us write those. We have to develop plans for the architectural structure, which we are in conversation with some design firms to be able to do that. We have to do some environmental studies, and we have to, there's just this list of things that will need to happen in order to develop this space at this early stage. Moving forward, the other loans that we are looking to apply for, like I said, as a USDA loan that the facility itself would pay back. So it would not have an additional owner of it. And there is an opportunity to have some USDA dollars from a grant that is going to be announced really soon. And we're anticipating, the industry is anticipating it anytime. The first grant that was proposed by the USDA was for 20% of the total cost of the processing facility, and that was for already established processing facilities. This Nether grant is expected to have similar attributes as the first grant, and this document developed completely would go fundamentally for that grant, and then also the USDA loan program that we can use. And this, again, going on this path forward versus private investment would allow us to create it into a trust. And this is something that really excites me a lot, is that if we put the facility into something that's called a perpetual purpose trust, which is it's a legal tool that social entrepreneurs are using frequently, and it's becoming more popular globally. But this will allow the corporation, because it will be it will be a corporation, but it will be able to own itself essentially. So 51% of the corporation will be owned by the trust. The other 49% will be able to use to further develop relationships. So to give you an idea, like what is going to happen in the future, this is what I firmly believe, and I know it's hard to see what's going to happen in the future, but I'm really tapped into this industry, is that with the money that's being invested by the Biden administration, there's going to be a lot of these smaller facilities that were going to be built throughout the United States. And those are going to be highly attractive pieces of assets for larger private organizations. And our facility put into a PPT would not allow a full consolidation of the building. If Cargill, for instance, comes in and decides that this is a really important asset, they can buy up to 49% of it. And that 51% of that ownership would be governed by a trust stewardship committee that's going to develop the bylaws that's going to govern the entire operation. So one of the values that I have strongly put in place, besides the fact that we need to protect our food system, and this will be the asset that we will protect our food system with, but it's also allowing other people the opportunity to have processing available to them. So one of the problems that I have faced is we have lost about 62% of our processing capability in my business itself. And it is very much a localized regional company. And I am not the only business owner and farmer who is suffering from the lack of infrastructure. And this will allow us the ability to create the bylaws, so that it would say that a third of it would be for production of Central Grazing Company. This is just for instance, just for sake of conversation, it had to be developed, right? But a third of it would be for Central Grazing Company's production, because we hoped to be able to service that through the agrovoltaics opportunities that exist for land access for farmers. A third of it would be for other scalable businesses that exist in Douglas County. Meat LLC is one of them, that is a local meat distributor. There's a few others that would have some scalability through this processor. And then the third of it would be for farmstead, farmers market level, people who have some livestock that they need to process for their own individual use. So these bylaws would not be, we would create them so they wouldn't be consolidated. We would create them so that it provided a pathway for more food innovation to happen in Douglas County, and whatever the other bylaws that we are interested in placing in here. I'm really interested in making sure that this processing facility services Douglas County first, and then surrounding residents second, as far as the production schedule goes. I'm also interested in being a resource for other regenerative or environmentally sound businesses or farmers to have access to this market.
Jacqueline, I hear you say, I may have been looking at my book trying to add things up. You said the feasibility study would cost between 50 and 75,000. Is that what you said?
No, the value of the land would be, that's what I would expect.
Okay. Yeah. How much would the feasibility study cost?
I'm sorry.
How much would that feasibility study cost?
I don't unfortunately have that budget in front of me, but it is there's some consultant pieces to it. We have to develop the financials that are in there as well. There's some bookkeeping costs. There's some The consultant package is the development of the flow of production. We need to hire a consultant that's going to help us create that it's the processing and kill floor. And it's going to, the consultant to write the HACCP plan, which is part of the Food Safety Modernization Act that we have to have, and to help us with the whole processing for the first year of consulting, so to make sure that we've got the right staff in place and the development of the training programs that's going to go into that as well.
Looks, Jacqueline, in your proposal, you had 440,000 outlined for contractual services, including the feasibility study as well as architecture and design. Does that number sound about right?
That sounds about right. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and some of that 440,000, it's like 125,000 was for site development, and then 305,000 was all the feasibility study, labor acquisition, training plan, more of the other things you're talking about. Okay.
So it's subtotal then of 305 if you're subtracting out the site development.
I don't think I have any further questions. Commissioner Portillo or Commissioner Kelly, do you have other questions?
Well, Jacqueline, I was wondering if you could just expand a bit on your discussions around being more inclusive of BIPOC farmers in the community, because I noticed that was a big part of the discussion, but I didn't quite see where that fit in with some of the collaborators and plans moving forward.
I think that is a discussion that is highly important for our food sovereignty, and the bylaws that we create. I hope to my goals are to populate that board with the individuals that we need to have in the conversation to guide us in the right place. And my personal work in this is that as a some insight into the challenges that underrepresented farmers have to access infrastructure and land access. I'm familiar with some of those challenges, and even to have the opportunity to speak here to the commission and have this be part of the discussion really drives that path forward of how important it is to have the diversity in our food system to survive. I'm a fundamental believer that the health of our planet is necessary to have a diversified population, have access to food. We need to be able to allow people to have food sovereignty, and that is something that is currently not in our food system. So creative ways, thinking outside the box of how to develop this program so that we can continue to facilitate people being graduated through programs that train farmers that typically don't have access to land. I just recently started a nonprofit that's called the Agrarian Future Alliance that is in the startup phases, and this primary focus of this organization is to make the connection between populations of underrepresented farmers and opportunities for land access and processing with this facility. So it's a highly critical point that we are putting as a primary focus of this. And I'm really hopeful to have further conversations with you guys as partners of like, what does that look like and how do we shape our food system differently, and what are the goals that we want for this facility?
Jacqueline, I guess I do have one more question about sort of to piggyback off of that and also just flesh out some of the collaborative conversations you've had so far. Will you speak a little bit specifically to your ideas and conversations so far with local partners or regional partners around workforce training and what the development of that piece of it would look like if this facility were up and running, and what's the status of those conversations? Specifically, I'm thinking about with Peaslee Tech.
Yeah, there's still an early phase conversations, but there's definitely a lot of momentum forward for that. We have had discussions about how do we fund this training program. There's been discussions about what partnerships to bring in. We have come to the conclusion that we will partner with K-State, Peaslee Tech, and then offer a traditional training program with applicable on-hands training at our site. So butchery is very much a skill that has to be trained. It's a highly skilled position to be able to have that level of sophistication and artistry and breaking down a whole animal. And that training program is highly necessary for the success of all of our food system. And so having the partnership with Peaslee Tech, where they would provide, in conjunction with K-State, and specifically the K-State Meat Science Lab, which they have a small processing facility over there. And there's a woman by the name of Dr. Elizabeth Boyle, who is also in this conversation about how do we develop this training program in order to shuffle residents or people who are interested in the meat packaging industry to be able to come through. And there's also some conversations with tapping into technical services or working through local high schools to be able to recruit some of those training participants into this level. There is a very successful program that is close to Branson, Missouri, that is a training program for meat cutting, and it's through a university there that we will model some of that training programs for. But all of that has to be fleshed out and developed. And in my proposal, we put it in first because we didn't, the ARPA funds was very much, how projects move forward and things shift and change, and that cut and wrap facility that we were going to put the training program in can be pushed back into the development stage 2, which is going to allow us to free up some of that request from the county side. And we, I'm not sure if Peaslee Tech wants to weigh in on that opportunity or how to move forward.
I appreciate you clarifying that is a specific element related to the cut and wrap facility, which now is thought to be a later phase. Any further questions, commissioners? Okay. Thanks for being here with us, Jacqueline.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing. You've done a fantastic job with being transparent and supporting our food system. Douglas County is, I came here in 2015 because of the food culture, and this sends us a huge message to farmers and rural residents of the importance of our food security. And so I look forward to partnering with you guys further on this. Thank you.
Thoughts, Commissioner Kelly?
So I don't know if we want to have more discussion, but I'm sort of working on a spreadsheet here, sort of getting down to dollars, and maybe I could make a suggestion if it's okay with commissioners, and then we could sort of wrestle that around a little bit.
I'll have Brooke go ahead and throw the spreadsheet up, and Commissioner Portillo, I've got my eye on you, so if you have questions, just flag us down.
So Brooke, one I didn't quite catch on my spreadsheet was Peaslee Tech. That was a different number, right? It wasn't 225.
Yeah, that new ask is now reduced to 197.50.
Oh, that's beautiful. Ooh, okay. So I would put that on there. There seems to be some consensus for that. Let Brooke coach up. Oh wait, I got the number wrong. The other one is I put on 305,000 for central grazing for their feasibility study. And then I'm 300 short here. And then, I must be off on some number, but I'm close. And then I wondered if there was capacity for, as I looked back at the early childhood proposal, they had $426,000 and $405 for renovation of the site on Davis Road, and that would give them some money for renovation so we could get some classrooms open. I think it'd be good to show a model of what they're trying to do. So I just throw that out there as maybe a recommendation. That would be an additional 426, 405, I think. And I didn't know how to add that in. So it's getting pretty close. So I just throw that out maybe as a starting point for our conversations, or if there was other things commissioners were interested in funding.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I appreciate you throwing that out as a starting point. I think that with those additions, we're just slightly over our amount. I would suggest that since we've reserved 33% for internal, I mean, that difference is pretty minuscule. I don't think it would be that much to maybe shift that amount from internal to external, if that would be possible. And then we don't have to come down to a very specific dollar amount.
Commissioners, I think that's fine. I just want to make sure we verify we've got the children's, the CCC number you at 426, because I don't see that in the proposal. So
yeah, I wanted to clarify where that came from. I was going to go try and pull it up and then.
So it's actually in their projected budget under capital outlay.
405.
And it's 605 Davis Road. The total estimated renovation cost was 426, 405.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Now I do. So you want to program Brooke, see what it looks. So 3, yeah, plus 426.
I gotta put my equal sign. And then, oh, I hit it. I'm sorry. What was that value again?
426.
405. Okay. So that does put us a little bit over down here on the bottom line.
And we could subtract 21,000 from internal projects if that's the will of the commission.
This Commissioner Reed, I'm good with that. And we discussed how that, how both 33% and 25% were sort of arbitrary random numbers, but that we were trying to think about internal projects specifically. And so we talked about that 8% maybe adjusting a little bit, and it is pretty negligible, all things considered, which feels weird to say about $21,000 still. But I wonder if Commissioner Portillo, are there any other projects on the high priority list that you feel we did not discuss this evening? I just want to check in with you about that.
I'm good with where we're at.
Okay. Then it sounds like we have some consensus and that we've spread the money around to some pretty important investments. And as we've also discussed in recent weeks' conversations, that in all grant processes, there are always some things that don't go exactly as planned on paper in the beginning. That's how it goes. So we very well know that there could be some money left over in the future that will come back to us to discuss further or shift around depending on feasibility of projects. So I just want to appreciate so many community partners for spending time with us over the past couple of weeks. Some of you have been here more than once, and I appreciate that investment in time and how much effort and time and detail went into all of these requests. And huge shout out to staff for all of their work. Brooke, you're just truly a math whiz. And you have helped me get so much better at math in this year and a half of knowing you. So I appreciate that. And just really am impressed with the amount of organization that you helped provide for us, but also for all of the support and constant communication and responsiveness to community partners and all the people that were navigating this process along with us. So I just appreciate you for that.
So commissioners, before I know we need to take public comment on this item.
Oh yes, thank
you
for that.
before we do that, what I prefer to do is at the end when the commissioners are ready to make a motion, my recommendation would be for you to direct staff to prepare final documents per our discussion today and bring them back to next week's agenda just to make sure I just like one more week to check the math and make sure everything's outlined the way we want it to. I would also, it allow us to document conversations around the behavioral health sales tax and the usage of those funds in here. In addition, I just also want to send a signal that, there's a lot of work that has to happen at this point, and language associated with, how funds can be tied to projects is something I might even want a little bit more time to do after next week. And, you know, could work with Brooke in terms of some of those kind of sample documentation of how we want to make sure these projects stay aligned with what we want to do. But I'd like to have a week to bring this back for a full formal vote, if that's okay with commissioners. With also the notion that we may have other conversations moving forward. So while I think we can tell a lot of folks that we're ready to proceed, there'll probably still be some there's gonna be a lot of additional work from here on out.
Yes, certainly did not mean to insinuate that the work is over. I know that it's a lot more work ahead for all of you. So I appreciate that clarification. Thank you also for the reminder about public comment on this item. So with that, I'll go ahead and open up public comment and ask if there's anybody in the building with us that would like to make comment related to our discussion of ARPA. Okay, seeing no hands, double check online.
Do have someone online.
Okay.
I am promoting Emily Peterson to the panel to
Thank
provide
you.
public comment.
And just a reminder for anybody else who maybe joined us a little later, please use the raise your hand function if you'd like to make public comment.
Emily, you're in the panel, so you can go ahead and provide your public comment.
Thank you. This is Emily Peterson. I'm here representing the Lawrence Restaurant Association, and I also own Merchants Pub and Plate with my husband, TK. Excuse me. I was hoping to ask a couple questions of clarification if possible. The Lawrence Restaurant Association requests specifically the direct business aid were ranked as medium priority projects. And of course, ARPA and the purpose of the funds being to offset negative economic impacts, including assistance to small businesses, feels like our request, falls squarely in those parameters. And so curious if there's additional clarification or questions that you have about those proposals for supporting the small hospitality businesses of Douglas County.
Thank you, Emily. We do not respond during public comment, but once we've closed it, commissioners may discuss further. Anybody else online that has indicated that? Okay, that will go ahead and close public comment and we'll bring it back for discussion amongst commissioners. I will just go ahead and say to that there were most, or at least I'm pretty sure a large portion, I think over half of the total projects wound up in that sort of medium scope from the staff scoring matrix. And then from that list, commissioners whittled down further. There were a couple, I would say all of the projects that were rated high generally aligned with what commissioners rated as high priorities also. And even still, there were a number of them that also fit squarely within the ARPA guidelines and what those federal funds are available for and eligible for that we were not able to say yes to in our path towards trying to find a balance between all of the requests and also having a focus on creating some significant investments and creation of new opportunities, new housing in particular, and new services that I think will serve Douglas County for generations to come. Any further discussion from commissioners before we move towards a motion?
This is Commissioner Portillo. I just want to say I also really appreciate Emily's comments, and I think that this is something that we discussed quite a bit when we discussed that rubric of how we would rank proposals and really looking at which industries already had support from CARES Act dollars and really focusing on those priorities of housing and additional social services in our community. It was tough because we got so many more proposals than we could fund. So I think almost everything that we ended up funding had that high priority category with, as Commissioner Reed mentioned, more than half the proposals ending up in that medium and low categories. So we made some tough decisions today, but I'm really happy with where we're at. So I'm ready to move forward with the motion. Though I think I saw Commissioner Kelly write the motion down as Sarah was mentioning it, so I may defer to Commissioner Kelly to actually make that motion.
Oh, no, unfortunately, I wasn't writing it down. But we can take a stab unless somebody else has it. I can take a stab at it. But before we do, I think it's important to recognize, first of all, staff's work on this. And it's been tremendous. And we're not done yet, but it's been tremendous. And then also, since we have so many applicants here and maybe listening online, thank you to all the applicants. It breaks my heart that we can't provide dollars for every one of these projects. Many of them, all of them, have value in the community. People are working hard on these challenges across our communities. And we, you know, there is no way, there's no amount of dollars that is going to make this community whole after a pandemic. And why we can say this isn't totally about the pandemic, it's about recovery. This doesn't happen without a pandemic, folks. We don't get this surge of federal dollars without a pandemic. So I appreciate those who understand the task that we had before us in deciding that. And I appreciate the effort that went into each one of those proposals. That took a lot of energy and thought. It wasn't wasted. We need to keep having those conversations and keep figuring out how to best serve the people of Douglas County. I'm not expecting another huge serve of federal dollars, so this is one-time money, but I'm really grateful that we had the dollars. This is going to be a huge impact on Douglas County, and this is more affordable housing than we've put, more supportive housing than we've put in Douglas County. We've entered into an early childhood education space, which is an economic development thing. It helps our children. We did a lot of great things with this money, and I really appreciate the community members that brought really thoughtful proposals to us in order to do that. I'll go ahead and make a motion to recommend that staff bring to us a finalized proposal for ARPA funds at our next meeting. Is that what you said? Do you want the date on that, or just next meeting is fine? At our July 6th meeting for ARPA funding.
A second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. Okay, well, that concludes our regular agenda. So we'll go ahead and move on to appointments. Do we have any up for discussion this evening?
Commissioners, you received a proposal from the Food Policy Council for Ryan Bowersock as the at-large member. I don't know if you want.
I know Ryan. Ryan would be a great addition to this Food Policy Council. I'm happy to nominate her for that spot.
Great. Is Commissioner Reed happy to second that nomination? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Awesome. That still leaves 2 seats open for Food
I believe
Policy
so.
Council. Okay.
And Commissioner Kelly, I'm going to remind you that I still need the Planning Commission.
I will have that for you before I leave this chair this evening.
Thank you. I think that's the only appointment I've got in front of you right now.
Great. How about your weekly memo, Sarah?
Commissioners, my weekly memo is attached. I just want to point out it's a busy season for a lot of drug court graduations, District Judge Huff's retirement. So there's a number of things in the packet in terms of some dates coming up. And then there was one other one. Oh, I just want to take a moment to recognize that Tony Foster, our Director of Emergency Communications, was selected by the governor to serve on the statewide 911 Council, representing communities over 70,000 people. And so appreciate Tony stepping in to fill in that service. So that's included in the memo as well. And that's all I have, Commissioners.
Great. This is Commissioner Reed. Wanted to mention that we got news. June sort of eclipsed me in some ways, and so forgot to mention at the beginning of the month that shortly after mine and Bob Transky's visit to Pima County for the Peer Learning Network, we submitted an application for the Familiar Faces Initiative Leadership Network that National Association of Counties was seeking elected officials to be a part of from across the country. And we just learned this week that Douglas County was selected to be a part of the Familiar Faces Initiative Leadership Network, which will include a couple of some quarterly meetings, a couple that are in person and some that are virtual, as well as I believe 3 or 4 different one-on-one technical assistance opportunities for us as a county to meet with, from Center for Supportive Housing, a couple of other agencies that are national organizations. So excited about that. I had the news because Bob had submitted it on our behalf, and just wanted to have a discussion with you all about I have an interest in serving as the commissioner representing Douglas County, but would like to gauge interest from you, Commissioner Kelly, about that moving forward into the next year.
Yeah, I'm super supportive of you. If you'd like to do that, that'd be great.
Same. Thank you for taking that on.
Well, yeah, I'm excited about it. Thanks. I'll keep you informed. And then also I wanted to just appreciate all of the staff work that went into developing a really lovely dedication and open house for our treatment and recovery center last Thursday night. And I'm getting a signal from Sarah that maybe she wants to share more about that. But I just wanted to super appreciative. I think it was a lovely event, and I've heard wonderful feedback from so many people across the community in the past week.
Actually, my last minute remembering is not associated with the dedication of the TRC. It was a lovely event, and really appreciated your comments at the dedication. So if there's others, I want to talk about the budget schedule, and it's actually great that Lori is still here. So that was what prompted me to remember.
Before we leave the TRC, I also want to echo what Sarah said. I thought Commissioner Reed did a really nice job of representing all 3 commissioners in your comments, and thank you for that at TRC.
Because of memory, I will not soon forget. So I was really honored to be asked, even if it's just because I'm the chair this year. Any other miscellaneous items from commissioners before I toss it back to Sarah? Okay, go ahead.
Commissioners, you have a draft budget schedule in front of you for next week for budget hearings. Budget hearings will start on Tuesday at 9 a.m. and generally run through the morning. We have a problem with DECA, and I feel so bad because DECA's got a big community event planned for on Thursday, the groundbreaking for their new outpatient facility on East 23rd Street. And so I don't have that resolved on this schedule yet. We're still working on it. What I might need to do is, and then Lori also has a conflict on Friday, which is my other open date. So I'm still trying to find a spot for where we can have DECA come in. They have 2 projects that I kind of want to make sure that they're there for. I will just say to Lori, we will be taping all of the conversations and have them uploaded to our website. So you can certainly come back and follow them up. But I just want to say what you commissioners have in front of you is draft at this point until I can try to come up with a different solution for where to squeeze DECA in, not on Thursday and not on Friday. So I'm still working on that piece.
Maybe one last miscellaneous item as we get prepared for the holiday here, to remind everybody to clean up after themselves out in the unincorporated areas. That would be a big help. I know that some folks are very excited, some are less excited about it, but if we could help out our maintenance folks, that'd be appreciated.
Yes, I appreciate that reminder, Commissioner Kelly, and I'll just add to it that I saw a wonderful map of Lone Star Lake in particular today that Douglas County Facebook page put out to indicate and explain both the allowable times and locations for publicly shooting off fireworks out there. So have fun, be safe, be courteous, please clean up after yourselves, yes. And with that, I believe we are adjourned.